芝诺这个词来源于古希腊哲学家芝诺 （Zeno of Ila），他曾提出了著名的飞矢不动悖论，即一支在飞行中的箭矢是静止的，因为在任何一个瞬间，这支箭都处在它确定的位置，因此它是静止不动的。中国古典哲学家庄子在《庄子天下》中也有类似的关于运动与静止的思辨命题：飞鸟之景，未尝动也。而量子芝诺效应描述的是微观世界里的一种奇特的现象，即如果我们持续观察一个处在激发态的粒子，它将不会衰变回到基础态。因此，科学界可以利用这一特质，使用高频率的观测来使粒子冻结，使其保持静止在已知的初始态。目前，芝诺效应已经被应用在制造超高灵敏度的 SRF 磁力仪，可用于生物医疗、地球物理勘测、航空探索等前沿领域。在本期视频中，托马斯坎贝尔将从虚拟现实理论的角度为您全新阐释芝诺效应的原理。这是一期普通人都能听得懂的科学命题探索，不容错过哦。
Effect will be even shorter. It's a very simple thing. This is how you set up the Zeno effect. There's a system, and I'll just call the system A. And A can exist in two states. This is a quantum system. So it exists in quantum states, which means it's not a continuous slide from one state to another. It's either in one state or it's in the other state. It's a jump between states. Okay? So it can be in two states, state A prime and A double prime. So it's just in one or the other of those two. Now, its normal state is in A double prime, but it can be energized into a state A prime. That just happens sometimes. As time passes, it eventually returns to its normal state, A double prime. So I'm just setting up the problem. Now, the Zeno effect has been seen and is applied to dozens of things. It could be an atom. This could be an atom of some sort. It could be a hydrogen atom with two states, and it could get some energy and excite the electron up to a higher orbit, and then it drops down. Those could be the two states, or it could be something else. I just may put it in very general terms here because the Zeno effect applies to dozens of different systems. They're just systems that are in one state or another, or multiple states, and get energized. So now let's see. These curves look a little like the Schrodinger cat curves from probability. So here's our system. This is what I already said up here. I've just repeated it in case you can't remember it. It's just up here repeated again. So this state has been energized. We're going to measure it. So we take our nifty state measuring tool and we measure A, and we go, I found A in A prime. Okay. Now what happens if I wait for 100 seconds, time down here, if I wait for 100 seconds and I measure it again, well, the highest probability is I'll find it back in A double prime, which is its kind of normal state that it stays in most of the time. Because the probability of it being in A prime starts to go down, 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 down until it goes to zero. And the probability that it's A double prime goes up, up, and up until that's where its state is. But we threw a little energy at this thing and then we measured it, and there it is at A prime. All right. Now, here's what's going on. Every time a measurement is made to determine the state of system A, here's how the larger conscious system, here's how the rendering engine calculates this behind the scenes. It takes a random draw from a binary probability distribution to determine which state it's in. And if it's in A prime, that's the excited state, it begins a clock ticking for how long it's likely to remain in that state. So think of computer code now. We go down through computer code and we get an if-then statement. If in A prime, then start the clock. Okay? Simple thing. So we measure this and we get A prime. If we measure it right away, say 2 seconds later, well, that's right, 2 seconds would be right about here. What do you think we're going to get? Well, the binary that we're going to take the measure, here's the probability distribution. It's got all of this is going to be an A prime and just a little bit possibility going to be an A. So if we measure in just 2 seconds and we do a random draw from this binary probability distribution, very highly likely it's going to still be an A prime. And then we measure it again in another 2 seconds. And well, it's going to still be an A prime. And every time we measure it, begins the clock ticking. So we reset the clock. The clock gets reset here. Every time we measure it, it says, okay, measurement, A prime. Now let's start the clock, because that's how the code's written. If in A prime, then start the clock. So this is just my little simple model of the Zeno paradox. This doesn't apply to any particular system. It's just I'm trying to make this as simple as possible so that the average person can follow what's going on here without being too sciencey. So this is just my simple Zeno paradox system. So that's what's going on. So measurements made to determine the state system A takes a random draw from a binary probability distribution. That's this one. Well, this is tiny. At this point in 2 seconds, this is even not fair. It should be a lot smaller than that, but I couldn't make anything smaller than that you could still see. So that should really be a whole lot smaller. So you get A prime again, you get A prime again. And if I measure it every 2 seconds, I'll always get A prime again. But I may measure it every 2 seconds for 500 seconds. I may measure it every 2 seconds for a day. And every time I'll get A prime. But it's supposed to go back to A double prime in 100 seconds. But you see, it never gets to, because every time I measure it, the clock gets reset. Well, that's a very simple explanation. This clock being reset, it's a very simple explanation of the Zeno paradox in terms of virtual reality, because I'm just hypothesizing if in state A prime, then start the clock as code. Okay, so it's kind of a simple version of the Zeno paradox. It could be a lot more complicated than that. Could be a whole lot more complicated. It didn't have to, the probability doesn't have to run down like this. It could just go straight across and then bingo, go down like this. It's just a little harder for people to see that. Here the probability distributions are the same. So that's the Zeno paradox. And you see how a digital perspective of code and an if-then statement makes understanding it trivially simple. Oh, that's easy to understand. Whereas if you try to understand it without the digital, without the virtual reality perspective, it becomes a difficult thing to explain. Much more involved, much more mathematical, much more difficult. But as a digital thing, at least this little simple model I've made, it's an easy thing to understand. So even if this were a lot more complicated and a lot more complex than what I've drawn, still the digital version makes it simple